We're at Bowstring Pizza and Brew Yard. Justin and I are going to talk about ritualistic patterns. It's going to be the premise of the entire podcast series. And today we're going to launch it off with a special focus on patterns and new beginnings. How you typically might go about approaching something new, whether it's a new thing you have to learn, a new activity you have to do or conduct, whether you're organizing a team that's new or moving into a new house, getting a new job. What are the patterns in which you take on new challenges, new experiences?
A motorcycle, for example, right? When I first started a week and a half ago, and I was trying to fidget with the clutch and everything and then learn the speeds and all that shit, it took a lot of conscious effort. And then I got to a point through repetition and time and putting miles on it that all that stuff is essentially subconscious now, and I don't actively think about it. But now if I try to think about it, if I actively try to be mindful when, okay, I'm going to try to clutch and shift now, I fuck up. Because those patterns, like my unconscious, subconscious mind already has it ingrained. It knows how to do it. It knows how. Now I'm just fucking it up trying to put conscious input into it.
You're rethinking what's already been ritualistic.
Right. And that goes with anything.
And that's where anxiety often comes in, is that, like, majority of times, once you put things in proper context, once you see how minuscule you actually are when you do these new things, whether it's starting a new business or whether it's becoming president of the United States, like, or getting a new job as a fucking janitor at a gym. The same sorts of things happen ritualistically, and there isn't much difference between the two. You may think it's more stressful, but ultimately there's a period, there's a ritualistic sequence in which someone needs to learn something, which you described, which requires time and what'd you say? Repetition. So you have to repeatedly get good at something. And the reason why a lot of senior leaders at companies are in those positions is because they have decades of experience having done similarly sequenced activities that haven't been done before. So when you apply for a job and you apply for these new things, ultimately employers are looking to make sure that you've worked in similarly sequenced sort of environments. Like, that's what they're doing. You know, we put other words to it and say, like, I have 5 years experience of this, 10 years of this, or whatever. But ultimately, what they want to see is that over time, you have repeatedly done things that have caused you to learn how to learn in specific spheres of influence. So whether that's learning how to learn in a gym and learning, like, when people typically come into the gym, when you typically need to clean versus not clean, like, no different than a president. When does the president need to typically speak to people? When does he need to when does he need to put in executive orders? When does he need to fucking do the sorts of things that a president does? And people get all stressed out when they think of, like, the sort of responsibility that they have, right? But ultimately,
is this a reserve?
There isn't necessarily responsibility as much as there is, like, a level of commitment. Because once you are committed to something, you're willing to endure any how. Once you know the why of why you exist, like why you're here, why you're trying to live, once you put a meaning behind that, you can overcome any how. And so the ritualistic pattern, I would say, is having a why that can encompass and overthrow any how, or any sort of difficulty that you're going to face, or stress or anxiety or pain, depression, misery, torment.
Yeah, that's a great point, because a lot of times, especially in like American society and other cultures too, like people heavily identify, for example, with like their careers, their regular 9 to 5, right? Like, I'm an accountant, or I'm a bank executive. That's their why. Their why is to provide for their company, to help the company succeed in whatever dimension, by whatever metrics. But that's their why. Their why is that. And then when something tragic happens in their personal life, say they get a divorce, there's a death, say they lose their job, because their why was identified, because their why was solely tied to that job, now here comes the anxiety, here comes the depression, here comes the chaos, because their why was so narrowly scoped that once that it's essential.
They lost who they were. They lost their why.
They no
longer could endure anyhow.
Exactly. That's why, like you said, it's important to have an overarching why that basically encompasses, that will cover you covered for anyhow. And that's why it's deeper than business. It's deeper than family. It's deeper than any dimension of life. It's life. It's self. It has to be.
You can't say your why is to live. That's not good enough. That's not good enough, because you're always going to be faced with anxiety during living. You're always going to be faced with suffering when you're living.
Well, here's the thing. If you say your why is to live, what happens when you get struck with a disease? There goes your why.
Then there's a timeline on how long you can live.
And there's a timeline to your why, and it makes you that.
But there's a timeline on our life as it is, and people just forget about it. They take it for granted.
Right.
I mean, both you and I bought that life in weeks calendar. And we have that up in our rooms, and we cross off every week until we're closer to the average age in which men die. And we cross it off every day.
And
well, not every day, but like every month or so.
Weeks, But it's crazy, because like even just looking at the life calendar now, like, bro, we're more than a third done. If God willing, we don't get struck with a disease or get an accident that takes our life early.
It's insane. So like figuring out what the next third is and figuring out what the last third is very key. And you got to have a why that's ubiquitous enough that can encompass those segments of your life and living. And it never can be a job. It never can be a business. It never can be a family. It never can be like those things. Those things are all temporary and momentary. Mm-hmm. There is no sort of why beyond your death. Like that's the purpose of a legacy, is that like whenever you begin something new, what is your legacy going to be? Like, do you have a why that you can apply to every new beginning that you take on? Do you have a why that allows you to reframe what you're doing so that every new thing you do can be reframed to have a meaning towards achieving your why? Like, you have to have a why that's not money, because money is like never ending. It's going to bring about a depression. But the why you need to have is an intangible sort of goal in life. An intangible goal. Something that is only going to stand the test of time when people recognize what you've done after you've died. That's what you need. Your why has to be something that will continue on after your death. And you need to always keep pushing forward to that why. And then when you start new beginnings and new activities, endeavors, and things like that, you need to reframe your mind such that you know the reason why you're doing that new thing is because it's going to actively contribute to your why. My why is preserving the world's most important resource, water. That's literally my why. Like and community development. I think that ultimately the world is so fragmented and so sectioned off from each other that one of the things I hope to do in every interaction, every new person I meet, this is how ubiquitous it is that I hope to learn more about how communities operate, how civilizations operate, so that I can get ever more close to leaving a legacy that connecting and interoperability of people and systems and processes is the most important thing ever. And so everything I do is all suited towards improving what is sustainable and what is sort of communal, in essence.
Yeah. I mean,
And I only came about that because of all the shit I had dealt with. Like, I wanted to be a pediatric surgeon when I was growing up because I thought I wanted to.
So I was fake doctor, pediatrician.
Well,
or that's a surgeon. Okay, that's different. Yeah.
So the pediatric, I always was good with my hands and good with children. And I had this aspiration of being a pediatric surgeon, and I get arrested and get criminal convictions, and the next thing you know, I have to toss that to the wind and reconsider my life as possibly a trash man. It caused me to try and seek out purpose and a why that would fit within the archetype of a trash man. And once you start to think about why in the scope of very menial and seemingly stupid or like poor things to be doing, once you think about a why in terms of that regard, you stumble upon a why that is so ubiquitous that it can be applied to anything, any new beginning. And that's a ritualistic pattern I have, is that I never complain about what's going on necessarily, never complain about what I hear from other people, never complain whatsoever. All I do is try to mitigate how much shit is coming to me so that I can better sequence to myself so I can better sequence my why being applied to a how. So how can this new thing get done? I'm going to learn more about my why. How can I, so forth.
Yeah.
How can I learn how to ride a bike? Well, I think that if I ride my bike, then I'll be able to be skilled to I'll be skilled enough at riding a bike such that I can go biking with other people. And I can share a new experience with people. And I can foster community.
I can create a sense of community around it.
Exactly. And so that's my why. It's so ubiquitous that like
apply it to anything. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's tricky, man, for a lot of, like, my why is definitely a lot more metaphysical. It's not tactile in the sense, like you mentioned, like preserving water and
that was like if I'm being honest,
because ultimately, like we said before, like the relationship, the job, those things are temporary. Ultimately, water is temporary. Human existence is temporary. The why has to transcend the human existence, right? And I guess my why is, as I read more into different types of philosophies, Stoicism in particular, it's essentially acting within my nature. we're all humans, right? We're not trees, we're not dogs, we're not fish, we're not God. We have responsibilities as humans to act within integrity, to have a sense of character and live with different. Everybody defines morals different.
Yeah.
But to essentially be a unique expression of humanity. So when you meet other people and you interact with other humans, you show them something that they didn't know. You give them a perspective that they didn't know. That's what I mean, for example, just at my job, I'm so fucking out there with my thought processes. You see these people, they're stiff, they're very robotic, and then I come out there and I provide this perspective, and I essentially throw them off guard with what I'm saying. But then I see a twinkle in their eye, and they get intrigued by it, and that wakes them up. And ultimately, it's like I want to be a mirror to other people, to have them reflect internally and see how I move and see how you can move in your own unique way. Because that was something, and this is something that I had to develop since childhood, because I was never encouraged to promote my unique. I was never encouraged to express what made me unique, what made me who I am. I had to always conform to a certain definition of myself,
I always
right?
had to conform to what society wanted me to be, which is essentially to go to school,
because that's what my parents valued.
And that's what society valued. Everyone in school around you all go to school, go to college, get a job, get a family, have kids, and work for fucking 40 years and then retire. If you're lucky.
If you're lucky, right. That's in the best case scenario.
But the thing is like, back to the whole probability thing, is the only way in which you can achieve your why is to always keep trying, is to never let down, never like take what you have for granted, never like settle. Like, even if you're married, never settle. Never settle.
Yeah.
Like,
you get comfortable, bro. And it's the cliche fucking mind. If you're not growing, you're dying. I hate the cliche bullshit, but I mean, if you're not growing,
it's not even
settling,
cliche, it's logical. If you're not growing, you're dying.
Right,
Your
look at plants,
are
look at other, exactly.
If you're not engaging in new activity, new things, new ideas, new stresses, you're dying.
Yes.
Your body's not adapting. Your mind is not adapting.
Yes.
So the ritualistic pattern, I guess, of today is that you always need to seek out new beginnings. You always are going to have to endure new stresses, new difficulties, and new things in order for you to adapt, so much so that you actually start to see your why coming to fruition.
Yeah. And the only way to see your why is to understand not only reality deeper, well, reality essentially, because reality encompasses yourself and your experience. And the only way to understand reality better is by recognizing more patterns. Tie back into the patterns. The more patterns you understand, the more ritualistic behaviors you can.
The more new things you can get on.
The more new things you can get on.
The more new things you can do, because once you start to compartmentalize what you have done into those ritualistic patterns, like you said, like, you know how to shift your gears, but when you started thinking about it again and you were putting conscious into your subconscious, you were messing up more. You have to compartmentalize more of what you know so that you can take on what you don't know.
Right. If my mind's preoccupied learning how the clutch works, I'm not going to worry about speeding up and accelerating and doing all these tricks.
No.
Because I'm going to be thinking about the clutch. I don't have the capacity at that point. Yeah, that's good shit.
That was some good shit. Once again, we're at Bowstring Pizza and Brew Yard. It's the first of many more podcasts where we will have a conversation in a completely random location.
Yes, sir.
Peace out.